Hello BookTube, my name is Elizabeth. Welcome or welcome back to my channel, Bookers and Books. And as you can probably guess, I'm not home. I'm not even close to being home. I'm very, very far away from Ottawa, Canada. I am as far as I can get. I am in Australia, more precisely in Adelaide. So this building behind me, that's the city of Adelaide, Australia. I arrived in Australia on March 5. And originally in Sydney, and originally I was supposed to go north along the coast, like Brisbane, the Sunshine Coast, the Gold Coast, and all of that. But unfortunately, there is a hurricane that invited itself well before me. So instead, I decided to go south. So I went to Melbourne, so I spent quite a few days on the beach in St. Kilda, and now I am in Adelaide. And then I'm going to go back to Sydney and then back home to Ottawa, and apparently it's still cold and a lot of snow and all of that. But anyway, while I'm traveling, I've been reading quite a little bit, and I've done the stupid things of buying physical books, so I'm going to have to lug all of this back because there's no way I'm going to abandon these books in Australia. I'm taking them back with me. And these are all Australian books. It's sort of a mission I gave myself, which is not a very difficult mission or difficult to accomplish or something that requires a lot of courage on my part. It's just that I've decided to read Australian books while I'm in Australia. So I'm reading books written by Australian authors and that are set in Australia. And I started, however, with taking a bit of a risk. When I left my house, when I left my apartment, I did not bring a physical book with me. I had an ebook if I needed to, but I said, I'm going to trust the bookstore at the airport. And that was a risk. I came, and I was not necessarily looking for something Australian. I was just looking for something interesting to read on the plane. And I came this close to finding nothing because the bookstores in the airport in Ottawa, or they're not really bookstores, they are convenience stores, and there's a small book section, so there's really not a lot of choice. And in the first one, the main one, whoever chooses the books does not have the same taste as I have. There were no mysteries. There were thrillers, bunch of thrillers, but there were no mysteries there. And there was a bunch of hardcovers. I mean, who travels with hardcover book? But anyway, there was a bunch of those. And then there was another one a bit farther down the, not down the street, but down the airport, I don't know, the terminal. And it had a bit more choice, or at least the choice was more in line with my tastes. And I found a book set in Australia. So this is Everyone on This Train is a Suspect by Benjamin Stevenson. And this is the second in a series. I haven't read the first. So I'm starting with the second in the series. And the narrator is very well aware that he is writing the second book in the series. So the narrator is claiming that he is not writing a mystery. He's writing nonfiction because he's writing just what happened. However, he very much wants to stick with the rules of writing a mystery because his literary contract, his contract with the publishing house, says that he has to write a mystery. But he doesn't know how to do that because his first book was a success, but he just told what happened, and now he doesn't quite know how to go about it. Except that while he's on this train for this literary festival, a bunch of people start to die. So everyone on this train is a suspect. So from his point of view, he's just telling what happened, but of course from the reader's point of view, we know perfectly well this is a mystery novel. And it plays with these two levels of reading, of the reader who knows perfectly well this is a mystery novel, and the narrator who claims he's just writing nonfiction of what happened. At the same time, he's trying to stick with the 10 commandments of, what's the name again? The 10 commandments of detective fiction by Ronald Knox, the ones that Steve Donahue reminds us on March 1st every year. So he sticks to these rules. So if you're the sort of reader who likes a puzzle and wants to discover who the murderer is at the same time as the narrator or the detective, then this is the type of book where you can do that. Or you can do as I do and just read the book for the fun of it without trying to discover who the murderer is, or just by guessing as you would do for any other mystery. And it works perfectly well. It was super fun. I absolutely loved this book. And I'm going to read other books by this author because it was just so much fun. After that, now I finished reading this book. I was in Sydney, Australia. I I had quite a bit of choice for Australian literature. However, I found something that I don't believe a lot of Australians have read, or a lot of people on the planet have read. It is Through a Camel's Eye by Dorothy Johnston. Now, this is a new book, but I found this book at a used bookstore. I was in Manly, and the bookstore is Desire Books, and it is a used bookstore. And I wasn't really finding anything until I found this shelf that was written "For pity's sake," and it looked like they were new books, and they looked very much like they were self-published books, because why would there be a couple of shelves of new books in a used bookstore, and the shelf being called "For pity's sake"? For me, that really means, oh, come on, give them a try. These are good authors, give them a try. And that's what I did, because I'm on holiday and I'm a bit more adventurous than I would be back home. So I decided to give it a try, even though I was pretty sure this was an independently published book. So the publishing house is For Pity's Sake, but this book is, for all intents and purposes, self-published, because I don't think an editor went through this manuscript. There are a few typos, but that's not the main thing. The main thing is that there are plot holes. Not major ones, but small ones. Like, for example, our detective, which is not really, his rank is not detective. I think he's just a constable. And the main plot is not somebody who got killed. It's a camel that was stolen. So he's trying to find this camel that was stolen. Eventually, a body turns up, and they have to solve that mystery too. Though it's not so much trying to solve the mystery as trying to find the proof of convicting, enough to convict the person who has done it, because they kind of know who did it. But for the camel, it's a mystery. So it's a mystery of who stole this camel. So our constable goes about and questions people in the town of Queenscliff. I forgot to say that. It's in the real town. I didn't know it when I read it, but it's in the small town of Queenscliff, which is in the region of Melbourne. And it's not, it's at, so Melbourne is at the end of a bay, and Queenscliff is at the mouth of the bay. So our constable is trying to find where the camel is, and he asks one of the potential witnesses, who does not speak. He asks this person to make a drawing. So just draw it, and I'll come back in 30 minutes. And then something happens, and he forgets to pick up the drawing. And we know that because it's written, he forgets about the drawing. And then a couple of pages later, we see the person who just made her drawing, and she's waiting for the constable to come back. And he doesn't come back, and she's angry. And it's written that she's angry that he did not come back, and that she feels forgotten. And then 2 pages later, the detective has the drawing, and we don't know how that happened. It just happened. It's just a plot hole. And there's a couple of ones like that. At the end, there's a character, there's a bit of a reception, and somebody brought not roses, but flowers from their own garden, and organized the catering and things like that. And the name of that character who supposedly did that is Ian, except that the character Ian is a 14-year-old boy, so that's not him. He did not bring flowers from his garden. It's ridiculous. So that's a mistake. It was supposed to be someone else's name. I suspect it should have been Bob. But anyway, it's a mistake. So it's a type of plot hole. So there's quite a few things like that sort of show that this is a self-published book, and that was not reread by an outside eye who could have been critical enough to say, that doesn't work, change this, and a few things like that. The mystery itself, like of who stole the camel and why and all of that holds water, so that part is good. The characters are interesting, so on the whole, it's a good book. It could have been a good book if it had received this outside critical eye, just to bring together not all the threads. I cannot say they were dangling threads, but just to make sure that there weren't any holes in the fabric of the book, that everything made sense. So that could have been a better book. So it lacked finishing. So that's the thing. It lacked finishing. But on the whole, it was a good book. I cannot say that I wasted my time or that I was bored. It was interesting. It was fun. And I'm glad I read it. So that's despite all the little things that I'm saying did not work. And next, I was in the mood for a romance. And I wanted to read an Australian book because I'm in Australia and I want to read Australian authors and books set in Australia. And I had quite a hard time finding a romance set in Australia. And that is ridiculous because have you seen the people in Australia? There's a lot of handsome people there and there's beaches everywhere. It shouldn't be hard to find a romance set in Australia. And I ended up finding one. It's a new release. So that book is really, really big compared to like this mass market. Not mass market. This one is a trade paperback. And that's the other book behind. So it's a big book. And it is That Island Feeling by Karina May. And this one is set on a fictional island that would be about 2 hours away from Sydney. And it is a romance. So the plot is that our main character, female character, Andy, is going on a girlfriend trip for a week with 3 of her friends because one of them is just got a divorce, and they were sort of celebrating the divorce by going on this 1 week trip. And our main character, Andy, is the one who organized it, and she planned activities and she has a theme and all of that. And the girlfriends are more or less enthusiastic about all of that planning. They would rather just drink and have fun with the boys who happen to who by mistake rented the same Airbnb as they did, but they ended up staying at another place, another Airbnb. And of course, what happens is that the person who greeted them on the island, the sort of captain of the boat, who is a sort of, I was about to say maid of all trades. He's a man, of course, so he's not a maid, a man of all trades, something like that. So he would drive the boat, he cooks the breakfast at the restaurant, he cleans the room at the hotel, at the resort, and he takes care of everything, and he's also an artist and all of that. So of course that's our male hero, and it's just a romance. You can figure out what happens after that. So it felt good. It's supposed to be a rom-com. There's not a lot of comedy in it. There's a few scenes that are funnier than others, but it's not a super funny book. It's really a romance more than a comedy. It's more a rom than a comedy. But it served its purpose very, very well. It was fun. I enjoyed reading this. I read this on the beach in St. Kilda, and that was a very fun experience to read, just to read a relaxing book in a relaxing surrounding. It was a good feeling. So that's what I read on the beach. And then after that, apparently I had read enough fluff. I decided to read something a bit more serious, and this is Question 7 by Richard Flanagan. So this one is nonfiction. It is a memoir, but at the same time it's about a lot of things. So it opens with our author visiting Japan, visiting the place where his father was a slave laborer during the Second World War. So the author explores a little bit that aspect of slave labor, and what saved his father is that there was an atomic bomb that exploded in Hiroshima and then Nagasaki, and that meant that the war ended much sooner than it would have had not the atomic bomb exploded. And this is a bit of the beginning of the author's reflection about the chain of events that allowed him to be alive. And it starts basically with H.G. Wells. So the author H.G. Wells, who wrote a book called The World Set Free, in which he envisions for the first time the atomic bomb. So H.G. Wells, I didn't know that, is the first one to use this word, this expression, atomic bomb. And in his imagination, it was a little handheld device that would be thrown out of a plane. And that was published in 1914, I believe, 1912, 1915. Anyway, just either just before World War I or in the first years of World War I. So that was really visionary, because even at the time, planes existed, but nobody really thought of them as weapons of war. Perhaps you could use them to spy over the enemy's lines, but to throw bombs out of the window, that was not really thought of. But of course, at the end of World War I, of course, planes were weapons of war. And by the time World War II arrived, they were essential. And so it started with that. And then there was a physicist, a Hungarian Jew, who sort of saw how things would go and left Hungary very quickly. He left in 1933. As soon as Hitler came to power, he fled first to England and then to the United States. And when he read H.G. Wells' book, he figured there's something there. And he kept thinking about it and kept thinking about it, and then he figured out how the atomic bomb could be possible. And he wrote to various people in high offices. So he patented something, and he tried to keep his discovery secret. And he wanted the scientific community to keep their discovery secret from the Nazis, because he didn't want the Nazis to have the atomic bomb. And eventually he talked to Einstein, who is the one who wrote to President Roosevelt to talk about this atomic bomb. And that is a bit what started the whole Manhattan Project. And then, of course, the bomb exploded, and then his father was liberated, and then that enabled the author to be born. So that's the content of the book in a nutshell, but I'm not doing it justice, because it's the type of book that goes a little bit in all direction. It is not told in this linear fashion that is just from 1910 to the present. It pops to various places, from H.G. Wells to Japan during World War II, to his childhood in Tasmania, to a bunch of places like that. At the very end of the book, there's an acknowledgement, and he says that the conversations between H.G. Wells and Rebecca West, who was H.G. Wells' mistress, were his creation. And normally, that is the sort of thing that I absolutely hate, when nonfiction writers invent stuff. I hate it. But I read this on the train between Melbourne and Adelaide, and for some reason, when I'm on a train, I am a lot less critical of what I read. I don't know why. I think it's because I am on this journey physically, and somehow I'm more willing to be on this journey intellectually, metaphorically. And I was not reading critically at all. I was just enjoying reading the book. And I was willing to accept anything the author presented me with. So even though there were invented conversations and very, very few endnotes, so all of the endnotes fit on a single page. So despite that, I didn't mind. In other circumstances, I probably would have, I don't know, maybe not ranted, but I would have complained quite a bit about the fact that there's invention in a nonfiction book. But in this particular case, I didn't mind because I didn't pay attention. So I very much enjoyed this book. It's very good. And it's very good. So it's another Australian book. This one, the Australian parts are set in Tasmania. So of the 4 books that I've read so far, they are all set in different parts of the country, which is something that I think is very interesting. It sort of makes me visit the country, even though there are places in there that I'm not going to visit. I'm not going to go to Tasmania, and I'm not going to go to Darwin and go in the middle of Australia. Yeah, my trip is nearing the end. I have about a week left, a bit more than a week left. And after Adelaide, I'm going back to Sydney. So there's not that many parts of the country that I'm going to have seen. But nevertheless, I've seen quite a bit in the books. So the books are sort of completing my travels. And that's it for me for what I've read. I'm still reading Australian, so the one that I'm currently reading is Shark Arm. It is a true crime novel. It's not a novel, it's true crime nonfiction. And this is about a murder that happened in the 1930s, in 1935. What happened was that in 1935, there was this aquarium near the beach in Sydney. The promoters were showing sharks that they had captured in the harbor a little bit before. Of course, the sharks didn't have a very long life expectation in these aquariums. They would live like for a week or two and then they would die. But one of them, at some point, just coughed up something, and it was a human arm with a very distinctive tattoo on it, and that meant that the person could be identified, and an investigation happened. So it became a very famous murder case in Australia in 1935, because of course it's very spectacular, an arm being spat back by a shark in front of spectators. So it was not in the middle of the day when there was a lot of crowds. The crowds were gone for the most part, but there was still a dozen people who saw the shark just cough up this human arm. And at the time it remained unsolved, and the authors here have access to the police file and to various other investigations that were made throughout the decades after that. And the authors, apparently according to the back cover, the authors think they have found who did it and what happened and how it happened. So it's a true crime that pretends to solve a murder. So I'm sure it's going to be super interesting. I am about a third of the way through. I am at page 108 out of 290. So I'm about a third of the way through. The murder has happened, so now we are in the investigation into the what happened and how did it happen and whose fault was it. So I'm sure it's going to be super good. So far it's very, very good. And so that's it. So these are my Australian books. They do not fit in my luggage. I'm going to have to buy some extra luggage to bring all the books back. It's ridiculous. Well, it's ridiculous without being ridiculous, because I have to buy a backpack anyway, because I booked a camping trip and I don't have a backpack. I just have my big suitcase with little wheels, and I cannot really bring that on a camping trip. So I have to buy a backpack anyway. So I figured now I'm going to use the backpack to book the books. So now that means that for the next 10 days, not quite 10 days that I have left in Australia, I can buy more books, because now I have a backpack to bring them back in. So I can buy more books. Anyway, so that's it for me. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books, or if you have some good Australian books to recommend me. I'm going to take recommendations. And thank you everyone for watching. I will see you in the next video. I don't know when that will be. I don't know where I will be, but I'll be there at some point. So thank you for watching, and à la prochaine.